This is JTH,
Del Zero.
and this is part 3 of our 200th video special, part 3 of our reaction to Silent Ponyville 2.
Yep.
When we last left off, Fluttershy dozed off. So let's get going. Fluttershy snapped awake when a loud explosion rocked the house. A vase that had been placed next to the couch came crashing to the ground, shattering to pieces. What was that? She asked, moving quickly to get off the couch. She instantly regretted the fast move and twisting her body in a way that didn't approve as her chest roared at her in pain.
Yeah.
She collapsed on the floor, panting as her chest throbbed. For the moment she had forgotten about her injuries. She groaned as she carefully sat up, making sure not to offend her wound. She inspected her dressing carefully. Her injuries hadn't bled any more than expected during her sleep, and the recovery was about where she would have expected it for a bit of sleep. She carefully got to her hooves and took a few steps. Then she stretched her wings before wincing slightly and shoving them back closed. She could move, she could walk, she could fly with a bit of pain, but she still wasn't about to go flying around.
No.
How long was I asleep? Fluttershy asked aloud. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. Her body had done it almost on its own, as if on instinct. I got separated from Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie. I should have been looking for them, not sleeping. Fluttershy felt awful for having left her friends alone, even though it was against her will. They were probably worried about her and must have gone to look for her. Oh, I hope you two are alright. Fluttershy tried not to let her worries hold her back before moving to the front door of the house she was in. The door was locked. She stared at the door in shock. The door was locked from the inside. Above the handle to the door there was a doll-shaped symbol hovering over the lock. Why is the door locked? Fluttershy frowned, staring at the door. She had to get back outside and see what was going on. She turned back around to look at the house in closer detail. It was a small, quaint little house, but it didn't look like a house that would normally be built in Ponyville. She hadn't noticed till just now, but the building material was kind of what you would find in a cloud city. Material that was made specifically for sitting on clouds. Huh? This is a cloud house? Fluttershy looked around baffled. But the only cloud house in Ponyville is Rainbow Dash's house. Fluttershy was confused. She didn't know whose house this was, as it certainly wasn't Rainbow Dash's. She looked at the vase that lay broken on the floor, noting something unusual about the broken pieces. Getting closer, she could see that it wasn't really a piece of the vase at all, but something that must have been inside the vase when it broke. She carefully picked it up, examining the item. It was a white coin with the shape of a cloud on it, with tiny writing engraved on the edges that read, "The Floating Cloud."
The floating cloud.
She had never been one to take things from other ponies, but something told her that she was supposed to take this with her. Maybe it was Pinkie's words about what was going on in this place. Maybe it was a gut instinct, or maybe it was just something about the coin looking valuable. She carefully placed the coin in her bag before looking back up at the house. Her eyes drew to a movement as she hadn't noticed before. Outside the door of the hallway there were several moths flying outside the door. They seemed odd to her. The moths seemed to have no reason to be gathering by the door, unless perhaps there was some kind of food behind the door she could reach. She walked up to the door and carefully pushed it open. The door gave way, opening up to what appeared to be someone's study. The moths didn't seem to move, still confusing her. Slowly she entered the study regardless. The walls were lined with books on various subjects. She could recognize several different topics. Most of them were on cloud building. Some were poetry books, while others looked like business books. They all shared the same markings, though. They were books from Cloudsdale.
Books from Cloudsdale, eh? Silent Ponyville. If she's in Cloudsdale, I don't remember if Silent Ponyville 2. I don't remember if Silent Hill 2. I don't know if you. I think you could go to different places. I'm not sure. You okay?
Yeah, Fluttershy slowly walked up to the desk at the end of the room. There was a book open on the desk. Curiosity got the best of her, and she read what was on the page. Patient has shown symptoms of a weakened immune system. The case continues to grow more baffling as now the disc credits all prior diagnosis of what was wrong. Every step forward causes 2 steps back. I have to start going through new tests to determine what the cause of her illness is. I don't have much time, though. Her heart is growing weaker, the muscles are growing thinner, and the more time passes, I fear it'll rupture before too long. I'll have to start her on another set of medication. She won't like being on any more drugs, but we have to prolong this for as long as we can. June 23rd, 983. Medical case number 1156, entry 14. Dr. R.K. Mandeus. It was a book recording medical cases through the years. The book was opened to one of the last entries in the book, recording it of the unknown disease that had sprouted before the turn of the millennium. It seemed the book went on to explain more about it in other entries. Huh? Fluttershy looked at one of the pages. It was indented as if something was lying under the page. She lifted the page up to look, seeing only a small brown coin with the shape of a house on it. Written on tiny icons were, "The Old Home." The Flouting Cloud, the Old Home. Huh.
Interesting.
She carefully picked the coin up, placing it in her bag. She was curious, though, as to why the book was open to that particular page, or why the coin had been hiding just underneath it. She had always seen a lot of medical books around the house, and she'd read a lot of them, but now she'd become so good at tending to the sick and injured.
Stop it, it's fucking contagious. It's like every time I yawn, someone else yawns, I yawn with them.
Next to the book, she noticed something that looked like a long piece of thick string. It was curled up on the desk in a coil, as if wanting for someone to use it. Oh, hey, I think I can use this, Fluttershy thought as the light bulb felt like it had turned on in her head. She carefully reached into her bag and pulled out the lantern. Her jaw still ached from biting down on it, but it certainly didn't hurt as badly now. She placed the lantern down on the desk before taking the string and looping it through the handle. She carefully tied the string into a knot and now looping it onto itself, she had a makeshift necklace. She carefully placed the necklace around her neck, testing the string. It seemed to be the supporting weight of the lantern just fine. The lantern hung from her chest comfortably. Oh, so she's letting the lantern hang from her neck.
Mm-hmm.
She carefully turned the switch to test how hot the lantern would get, the flame coming to life. She let it sit on her chest for a moment, then walked around slowly, then jumped around as best she could without making her injuries scream at her. The flame danced to her movement, but never made the lantern too hot. It felt warm against her coat. The lantern hanging before her gave her good lighting in front of her. Though she'd have to turn around if she wanted to see something that was behind her. Oh, Fluttershy, you're so smart, she chuckled softly at her own genius. She turned the lantern off for the moment, since the house had plenty of light for her to see. But now she could still have light and not hurt her jaw any more than she had to. Nothing else seemed out of the ordinary, though. It was just an average study. She turned around and headed out of the room, leaving the rest of it as it was. She looked up at the moth that still circled around outside the study. She was still confused at their flight pattern. Her study of moths showed they usually preferred to travel following some source of light or near sources of nectar. These particular moths just seemed fascinated with circling around the air before the door. She pushed the thoughts out of her mind for the moment, seeing in front of her was now an open doorway into the kitchen. She curiously stepped into it, looking at the small but quaint kitchen. She could smell something sweet, turning her head to look at the table, seeing a pie simply sitting on it.
I have a feeling this is Soren's house.
Maybe. Who left a pie here? Fluttershy asked curiously, walking up and looking at the pie. It smelled like an apple pie. It smelled like an apple pie. I thought there was a particular extra scent to it, as if a special ingredient had been added to its making. The scent reminded her of her mother. Maybe this is Fluttershy's old house when she was a filly.
Possibly.
There was something she hadn't thought about in a long time. Besides the dreams, she hadn't thought about her mother in a long time. She felt guilty about that. Her mother had died of a disease when she was young, leaving her and her father to fend for themselves. That entry in the medicalist's journal.
Plus the beginning when she was having that horrible dream.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that was her mother who was dying in front of her.
yeah. Mother. Fluttershy quietly murmured, trying to remember her mother fondly.
Yeah.
Images of the pink-haired mare flashed through her mind briefly, though for some reason they all felt hazy. Oh, so she takes after her mother's hair color. More, as if she couldn't focus on the memories she had of her mother. If she tried to concentrate hard on a memory she remembered, it seemed just to haze out even more. Fluttershy rubbed her head in confusion. She never had trouble thinking about her mother before. What was different now? Was it because she was in this strange place? Was it a side effect of Twilight's spell? Was it the only thing that made sense to her? It was the only thing that made sense to her.
Maybe she's not thinking about her because she doesn't want to remember the horrible memories of her dying.
Yeah. Maybe that's what the center of her nightmares is.
You know, it's kind of sad is that I don't think of my grandmother that much often because she died from Alzheimer's.
Oh, really?
And it's sad. It's a sad thought because she didn't remember a lot of us.
Yeah, my grandmother died as well. Because this one kidney disease she had was already attacking her bones.
Yeah, it was Alzheimer's. My grandmother, she didn't remember me.
I know it wasn't. I know it wasn't Alzheimer's with my grandmother because she remembered all of us when we came to see her.
Yep. All right. Anyway, yeah, that's a little bit of a lesson for you about how our grandmothers passed away.
Sorry if that bored any of you.
Now I'm gonna go home and cry.
She looked at the pie longingly, but though it smelled good, she couldn't bring herself to try it. Something just didn't seem right to her about it being there. She saw something glint next to it, though, drawing her attention. Next to the pie was a gold coin with what looked like a young mare on it. In tiny writing, the words, "The Trapped Mare," was written.
The trapped mare.
Wait a minute. It just hit me.
What?
Remember in the first Silent Ponyville how Pinkie Pie found 3 different keys to open different doors? I have the feeling these coins are the same thing with Fluttershy.
Maybe.
She instinctively added it to her bag alongside the others. She still wasn't sure what possessed her to collect them. She turned from the table and walked out of the kitchen. The house seemed small. She was already outside the last door she hadn't checked yet. Carefully, she pushed the door open, peering inside. It was a bedroom, though she could only tell from there being a bed pressed up against the wall. The only other furniture in the room was a drawer with a glass case on it. In front of it appeared to be indentations.
These things are popping into my arms. Stab, stab, stab.
Fluttershy carefully walked up to the desk, getting a better look at it. The indentations were in the shape of coins with 5 holes. On the glass case she could see a note that had been taped down. Only 3 of 5 exist in this world. In the morning, noon, and night, quiet wind blows. Through the world, giving the world its shape. When the sun beats down, it brings heat. Cold and water disappear into the sky, awaiting for those to arrive that a home can be built. The world awaits, still quietly and empty.
Condensation?
It doesn't take long for them to arrive and they build what was once empty, if now filled. But though it is filled, it is not filled with joy and fun. Instead, there is a quiet, unspoken misery.
I'm not really that good at riddles.
Me either. Fluttershy read the note twice, thinking about what the note was saying. The drawer had 5 spots to fill with coins. I knew it! And she had brought 3 with her. Her instincts had yielded the results. Now she just had to figure out what this meant. She reached into her bag and pulled out the 3 coins, looking at each shape carefully. Okay. When water is evaporated by the heat of the sun, it becomes vapor, which the vapor turns into clouds. Fluttershy summarized as she carefully put the floating cloud in the second spot, figuring the first slot must be empty, similar to the effect of the wind. Next, they build a home in the empty quiet. Fluttershy thought of the spot next to the floating cloud and placing the old home in the slot. That just leaves this coin in this slot. She placed the trapped mare in the final slot. The desk let out a loud click, confirming that she had done everything correctly. The glass case in the drawer swung open, slowly revealing a small lever inside of it. Curious Fluttershy carefully placed her hoof on the switch and flipped it. Her ears perked up as she heard the sound of something moving. She turned her head to see a door-shaped hole had opened in the wall, and that wasn't there before. Inside was a dim-lit staircase that led down to what looked like a basement. Okay, all the same, this is a good story, but I just want to ask this. Where is the Slender Pony? I thought he would have shown up by now.
Well, in the first one, he was what, in the 5th chapter?
No, he showed up sooner than that. I thought he would have shown up in this by now.
Maybe he's not in the story. You never know.
Well, this would be I can tell this is going to be a good story, but to me, that will be the only thing that pisses me off if the Slender Pony is not in this story.
I could care less.
Fluttershy looked cautiously down the staircase. It was dark. She couldn't see past a few feet down them. Her music box was still silent, so she assumed there was no trouble just yet. She turned the light on the lantern on and began to make her way down. The walls seemed to be damp as she walked further down into the darkness. There was the faint smell of wet mildew that emanated from the darkness, but she continued to walk further down. She wasn't sure what would be waiting for her, but the area had been hidden, so her instincts told her something was waiting at the bottom.
Something good, I hope. Well, no, of course it's not going to be good. It's Silent Ponyville.
Yeah. The stairs flattened out before opening up to a wide-open basement. Fluttershy looked around, taking in the sight of the gray, moldy walls. She could hear the sound of dripping water, spying droplets dripping from the walls and the ceiling. The floor had small puddles of where water had collected. Her eyes wandered the rest of the room before noticing something in the corner. It was a small pony doll, worn and torn from years gone by, covered in stitches and rotted with age. Fluttershy felt a pang of nostalgia at that doll. It was a very similar doll to the one she had as a child. However, the one she owned wasn't so riddled with stitches or aged so badly. It was sitting in a storage box in her house, waiting for the day she'd pass it down to a little filly or colt of her own one day. Next to the doll was an opened and messy sewing box. Spools of thread and needles were scattered around it, as if someone had dropped the case in a hurry and left it there. She figured it must have been the case used to help to sew the doll back together. She turned from the doll and Kit, looking around further before noticing something glint on the ground. She carefully walked over to it, noticing a key on the ground. She leaned in closer, noticing that the key had the shape of a doll on the end of it. "Oh, this must be the key to that door." Fluttershy smiled before picking it up and placing it in her bag. Now she could hopefully leave this house and start looking for her friends. Her ears perked up when she heard a strange noise far off in the distance. It sounded as if a siren was going off, warning the town about something. The sound sent a chill up her back, but she couldn't explain why. Something was putting her off about the sound of the siren. She felt like she had to get out of the basement right away. She turned herself around and began to walk quickly back up the stairs she had just come down from. But something seemed off. She couldn't tell what it was right away, but something about the stairs seemed different from when she had just walked down them. The smell of mildew was stronger. The steps seemed more slick than when she was coming down. The sound of dripping water grew louder, almost as if it felt like it was coming from everywhere. Her ears perked up again at what sounded like rushing water. She turned to the light of the stairs behind her, hearing the sound from below her. Her eyes widened as she saw that the water was rapidly beginning to fill the bottom of the stairs. White froth from the bubbles raged at the surface of the rising water as it filled the stairs. Without wasting a second thought, Fluttershy turned on her hooves and began to run, panic coursing through her body, pushing her to run as fast as she could. Each of the steps before her were coated with water, almost causing her to slip, with each step she took. She heard it quickly filling up behind her, drawing closer as she ran. If she didn't get back up to the top of the stairs, she was going to drown. Her front hoof slipped, sending her face into the stairs. She yelped in pain, but quickly stood back up, trying to shrug the pain off. Her back hoof touched the swelling water and she burst into full panic, her legs stretching out and forcing themselves to climb the stairs faster than she ever thought she would possibly do, or what it would possibly do to her. I should have been out of here by now. The stairs weren't this long. I should be back in my room by now," her mind screamed as she ran. Her chest was yelling at her, screaming as if it had been put under too much strain. Her face ached with a dull thud. She pushed all that to the side, trying to make it an afterthought. She couldn't die here, not drowning in some staircase where she needed to find her friends. The water began to splash against her back hooves, drawing closer still. She panted heavily as her body was struggling to stay away. The stairwell suddenly made a sharp turn into a large opening, the stone steps being replaced with a metal fire escape circling around the large opening shaft as that reached into the sky. Fluttershy couldn't see where it opened up, but she wasn't about to stop. She began to run up the metal stairwell, having to turn every few feet to go up the square spiraled staircase. The water was swelling up even faster now. Her hoofs were doing their best, but she could tell that she wasn't going to be fast enough. Her heart leapt out of her chest and into her throat as her breathing became hard from her forced exertion. The water swelled, the back of her hoofs falling into the water. Fluttershy cried and did her best to run, but the resistance and churning of the water instantly slowed her down. The water rose up over her legs, over her body. Fluttershy took one last gasp of air before the water ran past her head, finally submerging her. She flayed her hooves in the water, trying to reach the surface. She was panicking. The water current was pushing her body as she was having difficulty orientating herself to follow the direction of the rising water. She put everything she could into swimming upwards, but her body was feeling the strain. Her light had gone out when submerged in the water, and she was quickly getting disoriented. Unable to tell which direction was the right one, the water swirled around her and it clouded her body and mind. She could barely think, and the world was quickly being lost around her. Her burning lungs forced her mouth open, the air escaping from her lungs wanting to be replaced with fresh oxygen. But only water was awaiting her. She was fading, and she could feel it. She wouldn't be in this world for much longer.
Damn.
Come on in, the water's fine. Fluttershy smiled happily as she gently floated around the quiet lake, looking at Rainbow Dash, who seemed hesitant about entering the water. Sure. I'll be right there. This must be a memory she's recalling.
I guess so.
Rainbow forced a smile to her face as she slowly began to put a hoop in the water. She slowly began to walk into the water, though she didn't tread too far. She kept herself about half a leg's length up above the water. Do you not feel like swimming? Because we could do something else, if that's what you want to do. Fluttershy said, slowly swimming next to Rainbow Dash, looking a little worried. It's not that. It's just... Rainbow looked away as if embarrassed. I can swim, but I'm not very good at it. Oh, is that all? Well, I can teach you how to swim better, Fluttershy said, smiling comfortably as she swam next to Rainbow Dash before standing up in the shallows. Well, I've never put much practicing on my swimming. After all, I've always been a fast flyer, and by nature. Water just seems slower in comparison. It's too heavy to get a good momentum going. Rainbow furrowed her brow as she kicked the water. Fluttershy thought about this for a moment before smiling. Well, I can teach you how to use your wings underwater so that it's similar to flying. You can actually get going pretty fast if you do the technique right. Really? There's a way to do that? Rainbow said, rather surprised. Of course, though it takes lots of practice to get it right. There are subtle movements that you've got to position your body correctly so the water will drag less as you swim. But it's possible. Fluttershy smiled, proudly feeling good about knowing something Dash was interested in and that she didn't know about yet. You have to show me. I should incorporate swimming into my tricks if what you say is true. Rainbow grinned eagerly. Of course I'll show you, Fluttershy giggled softly before moving back into deeper waters. Now watch carefully. She spread her wings in the water. She prepared to show off to Dash for the first time. Fluttershy's eyes shot open in the dark waters as she spread her wings out. Her hoofs flailed around for a moment before catching the railing on the middle staircase. She put her hind legs on the rail as her wings adjusted, battered by the current, but she could do this. She kicked off with her back legs as she moved her front hooves forward, flattening her body. She began to move rapidly in the water. Her wings bent and moved as they very carefully moved with the rushing water, moving the water around her wings to give her forward movement. She could feel the water rushing all around her, trying to drag her back down. She began to flap her wings precisely, scooping the water and pushing it against, thrusting herself forward as she slipped gracefully through the water. Her mind and body reeled and ached and screamed and tried to tear her apart, looking for relief from her pain, from the inferno in her chest, from the wounds telling her she had to stop. Nothing could make her stop, though. She gritted her teeth, she narrowed her eyes, she flapped her wings with every last ounce of strength she could muster as she swam up through the dark abyss. Looking, no. Looking, no. Needing an exit. A dim light filled the edge of her vision as she spread her wings far, grabbing as much water as she could and powering them down to thrust her into the edge of the light. A loud gasp echoed amongst the sound of the splashing water as her head surfaced from the water. She coughed and gasped, hacking and wheezing as she scrambled for an edge to the water, grabbing a hold of a floor. She threw both hooves on the ground, holding her up as her lungs escaped the sweet, sweet relief in the air.
Ooh.
Her head was throbbing like mad. Her body felt like it had been torn apart, and every muscle in her body was telling her she was lucky to be alive.
No shit.
She coughed up the water that had entered her lungs. She grimaced unpleasantly as the pain became more and more apparent to her. Her echoing pants bounced back into her ears, making her realize just how lucky she truly was. For a moment she had accepted death as an inevitability. She would have had no choice but to die in that cold, watery hell. Wow. The water was cold. She hadn't noticed in her panic, but she could feel herself shivering as she floated in the now calm water. She groaned as she pulled herself up, using any strength left to escape the water. She managed to drag her legs out of the water, slowly pulling her tail out as well. She lay on the floor, panting, drenched in cold water. Breathing heavily as everything ached. She felt her eyelids slowly closing, wanting to drift off into sleep to calm down. No! Her mind snapped at her, forcing her eyes back open. Fluttershy, you just almost drowned, not to mention you're drenched in freezing water. If you go back to sleep without anyone around, you may never wake up again. The oxygen deprivation may put you into a coma, and sleeping in this cold result could result in hypothermia. You cannot go to sleep right now.
That's true, to be honest with you.
She panted as she could feel the onset of her panic returning. Her medical training was coming back to her now. It was fine before when she just had some lacerations and bruising.
Lacerations.
Whatever. But this was much more serious. She couldn't go to sleep. She had just saved her own life, and she couldn't let it slip away from her so easily. She tried to stand up, get back on her hooves. Her legs shook tremendously. She could barely put any weight on them just before she slipped from under hoof. She felt her heart rate accelerating. Good. Stay awake. Panic might just be my friend right now.
Ugh.
She grunted as she did her best to stand. She had to get up. She had to start walking. With the last of her strength, she found she was on her legs and standing. Her legs were shaking like mad, but she was still standing. She very carefully began to shake her whole body, harder than her body's natural shaking. The water on her coat scattered as best as she could muster. There was no way she could get it all without being so tired, though. With being so tired. She tried looking around for something to support her, but the light was too dim to see anything. She looked back at the lantern that was still pressed smartly against her chest. She needed the warmth of the flame right now. She clicked the lantern, flipping the switch several times. She prayed that despite the waterlogging that it would still work for her. By some miracle, the flame appeared once more. Somehow the oil and the wick were still usable. Her head was groggy, shaky, and the world seemed to spin around her, but she did her best to get a good look at the world. She was in a small square room with a doorway open to what seemed to be a lobby outside. A large square hole was in the middle of her current room, filled with the water she had just escaped from. She carefully began to walk out of the room with the cold water into the lobby. Every step made her body shudder and cry, putting her on the verge of collapsing with each step. She needed towels to dry off. She needed to wrap up in something warm. She needed to put some food and drink in her. Man. This is tense.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually feel my muscles tensing up. It's like I'm expecting something to happen, yet when I think it's going to, it's not. She carefully walked towards the desk she saw in front of her. There were three things on top of it that she instantly took notice of. The first was a map of where she was. It read Cloudsdale Hospital in bold letters before showing the layout of the two-story building.
Hmm.
Cloudsdale Hospital? She stammered out loud intentionally. She could feel the frailty in her voice, but she had spoken anyway. This hospital was where her father had worked, the best doctor in all of Cloudsdale. He had saved more lives than most other doctors had combined. Wow. Sounds like her father was quite the doctor.
No kidding.
Even though he's a Pegasus, I thought unicorns would be the best doctors.
Continue reading.
It was thanks to him that she had learned all the medical knowledge she had for taking care of animals and other sick ponies. If Fluttershy was in a hospital, she was sure she could find supplies she needed to take care of herself. Fluttershy took quick note of where the patient rooms were. She had to come back to pick up the map. Her bag would soak the map up and ruin it for at her movement. The next thing she saw on her desk was a bottle labeled health drink. Just like in this, isn't that what it would say in Silent Hill games?
Yeah.
It would just say like you picked up health drink or something.
Yeah, I hope that these stories aren't like walkthroughs to the games, because that would just be ridiculous.
I don't think they are.
Doesn't
Doesn't sound like it would. She remembered from her visits to the hospital they were a very special type of medicine that helped relax and heal the body. She needed that right now. She carefully unscrewed the top of the drink before pouring the contents into her mouth. She chugged the whole bottle hungrily, the mister tasting of a bit like bitter strawberries, but felt soothing going down her throat. She finished the drink and gave it a moment to sink in. Almost instantly, she felt some of her exhaustion began to wane. The pain had been screaming at her began to fade, growing numb. Her eyesight straightened out once more, and her mind lost some of the foggy haze she had been floating around in it. She could tell the drink had a painkiller-like effect to it. She wasn't truly feeling better just yet, but she was alleviating the pain so she could feel better. Went a little too far there. There we go. It was now with her head feeling clear that she was able to get a good look at the lobby for the first time. The floor was made of rustic steel and was growing some kind of mold. The walls were falling apart from age, mold being soaked with water. The roof was caving in many places, and waiting chairs and tables were falling apart, and other pieces and torn to shreds. There were overturned wheelchairs and gurneys. Some spots on the floor had bloodstains on them.
Nice.
The whole room seemed to scream as it was nothing but a vile place. Fluttershy turned her attention away. She didn't want to focus on the state of the room. She had to tend to her body's needs first. But before she left, she read the last thing on the notice of the lobby's desk. A note that looked like it was written in hastily in a red pen.
I locked it away. It can't hurt us anymore.
The staring, oh Luna, the staring. They erected, but it won't go away. It's judging us. It knows, but it can't hurt us without it. I locked it away, but should I need, I have this code. Hide.
HIDE.
Which spells out hide.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna hide.
The note didn't make any sense to her the moment, but she felt it must be something important. She'd come back for that as well.
I would have stuck it in my bag already.
Well, don't forget her bag is soaked.
Right.
She stepped away from the counter, taking new vigor to move past it through the double doors behind it. She appeared in the hallway, one which was one she was familiar with from her childhood, though the place had aged into despair. She still recognized it. She quickly made her way over to the first room she could and pushed it open. Inside was an examination room. Through the cabinet, though the cabinets were falling apart, it looked like it had fallen into disuse. It was still an examination room. Fluttershy carefully removed her saddlebag from the pack and placed it on her table before moving the broken counters. She found various supplies, fresh bandages and a few more health drinks, towels and gauze pads, everything she needed to get herself feeling back to her top form. Oh, what a relief. I mean it.
Oh.
As she began to work delicately on drying herself and applying fresh bandages, she didn't notice the soft hissing that began to emanate from the music box in her bag. Oh my god, you son of a bitch, you're cliffhanging it!
Ah.
You are evil, Jake Karatagu, you are evil! Oh, tragically, it's getting late. This is the last chapter we can read. I cannot believe we have to end this in a cliffhanger.
Lols.
Well, since I'm off from school now and you basically only work on Saturdays, we'll have to see if we can hang out one of these days during the week and pick this up.
My eyes are burning. Let's end the video. Yes, okay, but anyway.
Anyways, this is JTH.
Mr. Joe's the hero. Ow.
And this was part 3 of our 200th video special, Silent Ponyville 2. We will see you next time.
Peace.